All right, and we're still at it here on Coast Salish Territories, 100.5 FM and www.coopradio.org. Joining us on the line now are Nathan, a Vancouver-based community organizer and UBC alum, opposed to UBC's decision to host the genocidal militaries on campus. And also we are joined with Khalil, who is a Vancouver-based lawyer, has a background in Middle Eastern studies and politics, and has been active in fighting all forms of prejudice, including Islamophobia. Thank you, the two of you, for joining us and taking this time out and talking to us about the Invictus Games. What's wrong with the Invictus Games? Are you guys just not into sports, or like what's going on? No. Explain it to us.
I'm sure we both love sports in their own right, but this is not about sports. The Invictus Games is really about sports washing, which is really about laundering the image of countries that are participating. And in this case, our focus is actually more on Israel, which, as you know, and I'm sure your listeners know, has been accused of genocide, war crimes, apartheid, and has been enacting an ongoing occupation on the Palestinian people. And they are participating and attending these games and being cheered on and lauded by the world on the world stage.
So is it fair to say that Invictus Games, generally speaking, is something that is not so problematic? However, it's the inclusion of the Israeli occupation forces.
That's a good question, and thanks so much for having us here today.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I was just trying to pose it to get a sense of where you guys are at before I make up my mind about you, or before I pigeonhole you into what you are, right? So just trying to get a sense of where you actually standing on the games itself, and then if it dovetails, or is it just that Israel is being invited?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good question, and I appreciate that sort of starting point. I think that many of us might have different feelings about this, and I think it might be helpful for us to take a bit of a big picture look at the Invictus Games before I think we focus in on the importance of critiquing Israel's participation. As we know, the Invictus Games were founded to celebrate injured and disabled military members through international sport competition. And we've seen many personal success stories from these veterans, from these individuals who have found healing and community through sport, which I personally see a lot of value in. I think where I take issue is a series of pretty hypocritical realities that exist around the Invictus Games that make me question whether or not the games are truly for the purpose of people facing the realities of disability or long-term injury. And we can dive into it, if that sounds like a good place.
Well, the CBC yesterday certainly made it seem that way. I don't know if you caught the report, a couple of reports on the CBC around the Invictus Games, but they certainly made that point that, look, the games are here for, self-esteem and to get people together and, stuff like that.
And
I think it's a complicated question, as Nathan mentioned. But I think one of the things we have to, focus on is what Nathan mentioned, is the contradictions that we see here. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, we have soldiers who have been injured, in tragic ways, and on the other hand, we're forgetting about the people who they injured. And I think that's part of the narrative here. And I think when you stand back and you look at the games overall, we have sponsors like Boeing, which supply the airplanes that send the bombs. Mm-hmm. We have Lockheed Martin, which we know makes the F-35. We've got Scotia Bank, which funds or invests in funds that create weapons of war like LB systems. So you've got a sort of celebration of the military-industrial complex built into these games. And so while that's something we should think about and highlight, in some way, that this is pageantry in some way, we should also, our focus in this case has also been who is participating in this game.
No, fair enough. Very, very fair enough. And I'm really glad that we started off with this discussion to let the folks know that the raison d'etre for the games really is, my opinion, is to perpetuate the military-industrial complex. It's to normalize it further.
Yeah. Could I share a little bit? Like, I had a conversation about this with my parents recently. And if it's all right, maybe I'll just sort of try and articulate the conversation I had with them, trying to explain how I felt about the games. I started with the founder. The games are famously founded by Prince Harry of the British royal family, who served in the British military. And of course, we know that the British royal family are at the core of the violent military expansion of the British Empire, which is responsible for numerous genocides of Indigenous peoples around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me question, okay, what's in it for Prince Harry? What's in it for the British royal family to celebrate these veterans, to celebrate these people who have been impacted by participating in the military, to celebrate the existence of a military? And then I thought a little bit about the sponsors this year. We've got Boeing, we've got we've got Boeing, we've got Lockheed Martin, and then we have Scotiabank, who invests in Elbit Systems. Boeing has had a relationship with Israel since before the state existed. They have been a provider openly of weapons to Israel since before 1948. Lockheed Martin is part of, you may have heard just in the last week, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, in 2025 confirmed more than $7 billion in weapons from the U.S. to Israel just last week. And that includes weapons made by Lockheed Martin and Boeing. And both of them are sponsors of the Invictus Games. And then I think, okay, well, what's in it for Boeing and Lockheed Martin? Why do these games help them? Why would they want to support this? And then I thought, okay, well, let's say that they really are here to support people who are disabled, people who've experienced violence and been left with long-term disability or injury. And in 2020, when the Invictus Games took place, during the opening ceremonies, Prince Harry, specifically addressing Team Ukraine, said, "Your bravery in choosing to come and being here tonight cannot be overstated. He said you came to be on this global stage, not to simply show your strength, but to tell your truth, the truth of what is happening in your country. You know we stand with you, and the world is united with you, and still you deserve more." But then, this year, when asked about Israel's participation, the Invictus Games released a statement to say that our focus is on the non-political, personal stories of the Games competitors and their family and friends, looking at the universal challenges of overcoming injuries and illness. The game offer a neutral platform that transcends political disputes, focusing instead on human resilience and solidarity among those who served. So I wonder, okay, somehow they feel like they can participate in political conversations about a military occupation in Ukraine. But when it comes to Israel occupying Palestine, that's not the focus of the game.
Gotta be very quiet. Can't talk about that. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely, right. It is. It's just hypocrisy at a level where, you've got to be like totally blind and deaf. I don't mean to use those words necessarily, but, if you don't see it now, it's really questioning like where your cognition is, sorry to say. But very, very good points, right? And this juxtaposition of talking about Ukraine, and I'm supposed that the Russian soldiers weren't invited during those games. I don't know if they were. Maybe they were banned.
China and Russia both do not participate.
They do not participate. I see. Whether or not invited or not, they just chose not to participate. That's also very, very interesting. Yeah.
But I also want to talk about for a second. Russia was not allowed to participate in the Olympics, and South Africa during apartheid was not allowed to participate in FIFA and the Olympics and in cricket. These sporting events, these major global sporting events, are also used as tools of propaganda in some way. And like you said, people get to decide what we're allowed to talk about, when it's political, when it's not political, and it's entirely based off of who is the darling and who is not. At that time.
And who's going to profit off of this normalization, this advertisement for the military?
What did you call it earlier? Sports washing? What did you call it?
Sports washing.
Sports washing.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially using sports to bring positive propaganda and media to your military, in this case, to wash over the crimes that you have committed, to present yourself in a positive light, to have people cheer for you, to have to just be a form of nationalism, like a sports team, rather than an army and a military whose job it is to, in this case, in the case of Israel, uphold an illegal occupation.
No, it is mind-blowing. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think I'd feel a little bit differently about the games if I saw the competitors talking about the realities of what's happening in Gaza, where it's estimated that between 10 and 15 children per day since October 2023 have been left with lifelong injuries or disabilities. If I saw these competitors who are competing in games that say that they're for the benefit of disabled people or people who have been injured long term, then maybe I would feel differently, but I haven't heard a word about it from them.
Oh, that's a very good point, isn't it? Right? Like if they were to engage in dialogue around the activities that they participated in, because quite a number of them were probably maiming and killing people, and leaving people destitute. And then to come and just celebrate that aspect of it as if somehow they are the victims or they're vulnerable and we need to support them exclusively without talking about the affect of what they had just committed is kind of warped, huh?
That is exactly it. They've come here to remind us that they suffer, and they forget about the suffering that they inflict on other people. And that's just part of the job that they're doing to try and help us forget what the acts that they had committed on other people, the war crimes that they had committed. And I want to just point out that, we're only now learning who exactly the, Israeli team is composed of. And there's certainly a very real possibility that these people were engaged in direct war crimes, either in Gaza or in the West Bank, and they certainly, if they were part of the IDF, have upheld what is, by law, by the ICJ's most recent ruling, an illegal occupation. So they are involved in that. And that ruling just came out on July 19th, 2024.
And I think that there's a case to be made that the participants of the Invictus Games, while many, potentially, particularly on the Israeli team, could be war criminals, I think that there's a case to be made that some of these participants are also a victim of the same system that is oppressing, harming, killing Palestinians or other civilians around the world.
Okay, unpack that.
These people have put their bodies on the line for the purposes of a military-industrial complex with sponsors that seek to profit off of this violence. And now they're being asked or told or encouraged or given no other choice to participate in these games that are also for the purpose of supporting the profits of weapons manufacturers or governments or militaries like the United States, like Israel, like Boeing, like Lockheed Martin. So I think that they deserve our compassion. But do I think that we should then absolve them of responsibility for not speaking out against these systems of oppression? Absolutely not.
Wow, that's a really deep point, huh? Because you just said that they're serving a dual purpose, with or without their... I don't want to put words in their mouth, but definitely a dual purpose here that they're serving. And yes, I can see where you're pointing towards compassion for them at the same time, not wanting to excuse their choices either. Wow. Yeah, no, I think I understand better what you're saying when you're talking about sports washing. It makes more sense now to me. Thank you for explaining that. Can we dovetail BDS into this conversation? Yeah, would one of you like to? Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. I can quickly give an idea of what BDS is. the VDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. And this is a tool that has been used, in many different struggles for liberation. One of the most famous being the South African apartheid. And just like the fight against South African apartheid, this call to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel comes from Palestinian civil society. They have asked the world, as a peaceful form of protest and pressure, to end the illegal occupation of Palestinians, to end the apartheid in the West Bank, to end the siege of Gaza, to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. And there is a list and there is a website where you can go to look up those products that are either made in the West Bank, which is an area that ought to belong to Palestinians, but there are many, many settlers, and it is occupied territory. And those products, you can boycott those products and play a role in fighting against these injustices and standing up for international law.
I think Canadians are becoming quite aware that boycotts work, especially given the tariffs that are impending here, and I can see the consciousness of Canadians turning towards Buy Canadian and Boycott American and so on. And this is a fantastic juncture here for folks to really do good with their spending, to look at what are the products that are directly supporting the state of Israel, and to think about not spending their money there and going for alternatives.
Yeah,
Where
and
can
I'll point
people
out just one irony is that if you go back, you will find a tweet from Justin Trudeau speaking out against boycotting Israel, despite their very obvious and apparent crimes against humanity.
Yes.
While at the same time today, you'll find a tweet where he is supporting Buy Canadian, don't buy American.
Right.
So it's just that same sort of hypocrisy. I think it's becoming obvious to Canadians, and it's becoming obvious to everybody, just like you mentioned.
Where would you point folks to for more information about boycott and sanctions? Or, I know that there are a few places, there's a lot of different lists. Where can you point folks to?
Yeah, there's bdscoalition.ca that people can go to. There's bdsmovement.net, which provides those lists and an explanation for why the products are on there.
Yeah, those are great resources. And I think that going straight to these targeted, organized groups that are doing their best to really directly impact specific companies, corporations, and industries, we've seen success stories here. And I also don't think that we should forget that the choice to not include Russia in the Invictus Games is no different of an act of boycotting than had they chosen not to allow Israel to participate. But there's this exception. There's this exception when it comes to Palestine and Israel that is born in this deep-rooted, I think, assumption or misguided idea that this is not an occupation, that this is not an act of colonial oppression, that this is not fundamentally about Western imperialism around the world. So we need to think about, why is it that something like the Invictus Games are so willing to allow the participation of Israel, yet not Russia, even though effectively to boycott would be the same thing. I don't think boycott is as big of a deal. It's everywhere. We make choices with where we spend our money, and by actively choosing to not spend our money on things like companies complicit in war crimes, I think we have the power to make a very substantial change.
I wanted to very quickly ask you guys if you can share any information around the connection between UBC and the Games. Are there any connection between the UBC and the Games?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit about that. I mentioned that I'm a UBC alumni, and we learned a couple of months ago now, that the UBC Aquatic Center on the Vancouver campus would be used to host the swimming components of the Invictus Games this coming Friday, February 14th.
These are supposed to be winter games. They should be swimming outside. No, I'm kidding. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So that's the connection. Okay.
That's the connection, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the games are being hosted here, and there was a petition launched where I think at this point it's looking at about 1,400 community members, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and folks from the wider UBC community are demanding that UBC rescind the invitation to host the Invictus Games.
Interesting.
Which is very much in line with the BDS movement, right?
Yes.
Like the Invictus Games are allowing Israel to participate. The movement to divest and to do a cultural boycott of Israel would be in line with not permitting the games to continue on campus. And I also think that there's a case to be made that having Israeli occupation forces soldiers on campus is a huge risk to the a huge threat to the safety and comfort of students.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be a place of learning. I also don't think that we want to look back in 10 years and say, wow, UBC was willing to host war criminals just so that they could get the press for hosting something like the Invictus Games. It's truly shameful.
It is shameful. UBC should know better. I mean, it's only been 2 years of students agitating against this kind of support and letting UBC know about this kind of stuff. It's really weird. We need to talk with the UBC people and ask them why, which we'll do soon, but they never take our call. It's okay. Now, before I let you guys go, there is a call to action. You guys are asking folks locally, internationally, wherever they are, if they're concerned to do certain things. Can you help us with that? What kinds of things are you asking us to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we're asking is that your listeners and those who think that what's going on here is wrong is to sign the petition that we have up on Action Network, and maybe I can share that link with you to share to your listeners afterwards.
You can just tell it now. You can just give the URL now.
Sure. Yeah. Nathan, do you have it handy? I don't know if there's...
Well, once you find it, you can share. So you want people to go there, sure. And there's information as well as the petition is there?
Yeah, there's a petition there. We'd like you to, and that will help you contact your political leaders to express outrage, but you can also do that on your own and go and contact them and express to them how you feel about this. I would also boycott the Invictus Games, and I would pressure the sponsors, those people that you, maybe Scotiabank, if you bank with them or others, to withdraw their support. And I would call upon David Eby, our premier, to take action. I mean, he has the power to reject Israel's participation in these games or put pressure on the organizers or to speak out and to not give these war criminals a global stage to sports wash their crimes.
Absolutely. I think let's participate in the movement to boycott, divest, and sanction. And one of the ways that we can do that is by putting pressure on institutions like the Invictus Games. I'll read out the URL to the petition now. It's bit.ly/Israel out of Invictus. That's bit.ly/Israel out of Invictus. You can get to all of the different actions from that point.
Well, that's awesome. We've been speaking with a couple of people. I just hear names are not coming. Nathan and Khalil. Nathan and Khalil.
Can I just say one?
Yes,
one
please
thing
do.
before we
Please
close
do.
off?
Yep.
These games, the motto of the games is, I am. And it comes from a poem, a really famous poem by Henley, which says, I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul. And I think it's important that we fight for a world where Palestinians can say the same.
Absolutely. Thanks, Khalil.
No doubt, yeah. And thank you to both of you for doing the kinds of work that you have been doing. I know that this is not your first rodeo. You've been working on these kinds of things for a while now, and I really appreciate that from behalf of our listeners, and thank you so much for taking this time out, informing us, and we hope to catch up with you as we go down the road.
Thank you
so much for having us.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate the conversation.
No worries. Take care, guys. Talk to you later.
All right.
And so we will be continuing on here with probably some electronic intifada, which will be coming your way very, very soon. We're going to take a musical break. You are listening to CFRO 100.5 FM. A shout out to Sister Aisha on the previous program, Eastside Stories. Thank you so much for all of the work that all of the volunteers at Co-op Radio do. If you want more information about us, it's really easy, www.coopradio.org.